Hey everyone, today a new episode of UI Design Daily, and I will talk about CSS frameworks this time, and especially if you should use it, what are the benefits, and historically why do they exist, I would say. So let's talk briefly about what I'm actually doing on the screen. On the screen, what I'm going to try to reproduce is another one of UI Design Daily design. It's the one that you can see on the screen right now. It's a simple page that is quite interesting with a couple of images and two-column layout with a header, some kind of search input. And so, like last time, I'm definitely starting with the structure on the HTML, and you will see that I'm basically doing the HTML for a really long time, trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do with it. And then once I'm satisfied, thinking about how I will manage CSS in the same time, how I will use Flexbox. I just do it this way. So let's talk about CSS Framework. So CSS Framework are supposed to make you more productive. That's what they're supposed to do. One other thing that I would say, historically, the most used CSS framework is called Bootstrap. I think a lot of people know about it. It's been released initially in 2011, so it's like 8 years ago. It's really quite a long time ago. And it's in this version 4.5 at the moment. It's actually the version 5 alpha has been released, I think, last week. And it's one of the most started projects on GitHub. So obviously a lot of people are using it, and why on earth would you want to use Bootstrap? There are a lot of reasons why you would want to use it. A CSS framework is supposed to make you more productive, like I said. And one of the reasons it's supposed to make you more productive is because it gives you components already built in that you can just quickly style, and that are already styled, really. So a lot of people mention sometimes that if you're using a CSS framework, it's basically you don't want to design it yourself. You don't like CSS, you just want your component to be already set. So Bootstrap was almost acting like a theme. You don't exactly write CSS, you're just using their components. They have a structure for the navigation. You copy the HTML that they pretty much give you, and they will provide you also with some JavaScript to handle the interaction with the navigation. So Bootstrap extremely popular, and I tried actually to use it when I started web development. One thing that I would say is it's difficult to actually use it and to get into it, at least about 4 years ago. No, actually a little bit more. Yeah, about 6 years ago when I tried to use it, it was extremely difficult to get into it because, like I said, it's components basically, but components were not exactly using React. So you would see HTML done in a certain way, and you would almost have to remember how to structure your HTML, so you would use Bootstrap elements, Bootstrap components. But it doesn't make it really flexible as well. You get this theme that is Bootstrap by default, but you can't really customize it as simply as you might want. And if you start customizing it, you end up with a really strange situation where you are trying to override a CSS library that is being provided to you and is trying to make you or is supposed to make you more productive. So it's definitely something that I didn't like to use. And I believe that the reason why I didn't like to use is because I was not efficient with it. And I think if you are trying to understand if you should use a CSS framework, just try it and see if you feel more productive with it. There's always a learning curve, and the learning curve of Bootstrap back in the day was too difficult for what I was getting out of it, so it was not beneficial for me. But you might want to check out the new version, trying to figure out if it could be beneficial if you start learning Bootstrap, and maybe it will be. One other reason I didn't like to use CSS frameworks is because of the size of CSS frameworks. CSS frameworks provide you a lot of classes that you can use, a lot of utilities, functions, utilities classes, and you don't need all of it. You will see sometimes Bootstrap providing you 120 different colors, 120 different background colors in classes so that you can use it. You don't need 120 background colors on your website. I can't imagine this being possible. And if you just want to use only a certain, let's just say, features of the CSS framework, what you had the possibility of doing back then is go on the Bootstrap website, and they had a list of the features that they include in their files, and you would just check which one you use to get a specific version of Bootstrap with exclusively what you required. So it was a way to remove everything that you knew you would not use. And it's great if you can just use it. If you know you're not gonna use navigation, then you just unchecked navigation, you get your CSS file that doesn't contain navigation, and you're set to go. Bootstrap also needed jQuery for interaction. So sometimes you would end up with a website that is extremely simple, but for some reason, because it contains every single CSS class of Bootstrap plus jQuery, your website will actually not load as fast as it should. And that's also one problem that I see with CSS framework like Bootstrap. I believe that Bootstrap finally got rid of jQuery for version 5. So that's actually quite a great news. Bootstrap version 5 will also not support Internet Explorer anymore. So I guess Internet Explorer is really coming to an end. One framework that I can mention that is quite useful is Tailwind CSS and utilities frameworks in general. The reason why I think they are useful, at least to me, is because when I tried them, they actually made me more efficient and faster at what I do. So if I'm building a website without those frameworks, I will just take more time. It will take more time, and the result might be similar. Maybe the result would be, let's just say, 1% better if I did everything without the CSS framework, but it's not worth it for the time that I get. So it's definitely something that I would recommend you to try, regardless of your previous experience with CSS frameworks. Try to see if you are more efficient with it, if it saves you time, if it makes your website actually better? And if it does, just get into it. The reason why I like utilities frameworks is because they're usually extremely simple, and the new Bootstrap and the current version of Bootstrap, the version 4.5, actually has a lot of utilities classes. What I mean by utilities classes are basically classes that mimic properties of CSS. So you would have a property that will be called flex or flex row, exactly the same way as a flex property. And in your HTML, you will just say class equal flex and flex row, and those properties will be applied. So it's almost like your CSS file doesn't exist. You can actually build an entire website without a line of CSS, just because the framework is providing you all those utilities classes that replace essentially CSS properties. And the benefit of that, one of the main benefits that I would say for CSS frameworks, is the way they deal with media queries. If you're building a website right now, you might want to build a responsive website. We're in 2020, there are good chances that if you build a website, someone will want to see it on mobile. But seeing it on mobile means that you have to take care of media queries on your end in your CSS. You might ask yourself a couple of questions about the breakpoints. You might want to be sure to get everything set up, and your CSS might be a bit more complicated because of all of those media queries. When you use CSS frameworks, they provide you often some ways of defining media queries simply. So, like I said, if you're using a utility first CSS framework, and you have a class that is called flex or flex row or flex column, you define it in your HTML, and the way you will define it in your HTML is for different media queries is by saying SM flex, MD flex, LG flex, for depending on exactly which media queries you want this property to be applied. So usually they follow, let's just say, the mobile first media query approach, which means that if you actually apply one of those classes on, let's just say, the small media query, the small media queries will apply for every sizes above. So small will apply for medium, large, and above, and the classic one will apply for everything. So it's really powerful because you can easily, without defining media queries in your CSS, say that you want flex direction to be grow when you're using desktop, but when you're using mobile, you want the flex property to be set to colon. And to make sure you understand what I mean by it follows the mobile first approach. In that circumstances where you want colon on mobile, and then on desktop you want flex row to be applied instead of flex colon, the way you would do it is say flex colon as a class, and you would put LG flex row 2. So you would have flex colon LG flex row, and basically LG will override the mobile version of it. So by default everything is mobile. That's what I wanted to say. So it's definitely a gain of time. The breakpoints are already defined and they're usually really good. You do have a CSS reset that is provided most of the time, so it will be similar in every different browser. You will not see any differences between Firefox, Chrome, Opera, Safari. They will all look similar. You could apply that yourself and use normalize .css, preflight.css, or another one of the reset library out there. I think reset.css is actually another one. But those CSS framework can do it for you. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next video. Bye.